So far in this series, we've talked about ninja gaidens, ninja spirits, futuristic ninjas, pizza-loving ninjas, and ninjas with long shadows. But the one ninja that we haven't talked about is none other than Joe Musashi from Shinobi. This was Sega's leading ninja in the 1980s and 90s, and yet this is the first time we've even muttered his name in a Game Over episode. Well, that ends in 2020 because we're finally going to take a look at Shinobi's entire 8 and 16-bit library. Well, turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're going to spoil the stories and endings for Shinobi, Revenge of Shinobi, 2 different Shadow Dancer games, Return of the Ninja Master, and even the Cyber Shinobi. This is Game Over, the early years. Before we dive into the sequels, we first need to take a look at where Joe Musashi came from. Orphaned as a young boy, Joe was adopted by the Oboro clan and trained by Nakahara to become the Ninja Master. All that work was put to the test in the first game, which saw Joe fight through 5 tough stages to save a bunch of abducted children. Now, if you're playing through the Japanese version of Shinobi, then a shadowy crime syndicate named Zed kidnapped the children of the Oboro village. The American version, on the other hand, ratchets up the excitement level by saying that the terrorist network known as Ring of Five has taken the children of the world's leaders and are holding them hostage. No matter which version you play, the outcome is mostly the same. Joe makes his way to the crime syndicate's base of operation and takes on a mysterious figure known as the Masked Ninja. But who could this powerful boss be? Well, watch this shocking twist ending to find out. Okay, so maybe it wasn't all that shocking, but at least there was some closure. That's more than I can say about the ending found in the Nintendo Entertainment System version, which is just this still picture of Joe meditating in the middle of a grassy field. Or maybe that's a swamp. It's kind of hard to tell. Let's just move on. Now, okay, this is where things start to get confusing. When I say the name Shinobi 2, I could be talking about one of 4 entirely different games. 5 if you count Nightshade. On the Genesis, we have the Return of Shinobi, followed by Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi, which shouldn't be confused with the completely different Shadow Dancer game found in the arcade. Oh, and don't forget about Shinobi Part 2, the Cyber Shinobi from 1990, and the Game Gear sequel, Shinobi 2, The Silent Fury. Look, this is a shockingly confusing timeline that is somehow even more complicated than the Terminator sequels. So when it comes to the arcade original, there was only one sequel. Shadow Dancer picks up years after the events of the first game and centers on Joe's estranged son, Hayate. Actually, there's a lot of confusion about who you're playing in this game, since it never actually spells it out. Depending on the instruction manual you read, the character could be anybody from Takashi to Fuma to Joe Musashi himself. For the sake of this video, we're just going to accept that it's a young Hayate and his pet dog. The setup sees a terrorist organization known as Asian Dawn attempting to bomb the Earth from the space station Olympia. This sees Hayate fight through an airport, a junkyard, and a cave in an effort to get to the shuttle before it takes off. The whole thing ends with a one-on-one fight against what appears to be a formidable female guard. Hayate strikes, and this is what happens next. Now, before we talk about Shadow Dancer on the Genesis, we first need to rewind and go back to the Revenge of Shinobi from 1989. This takes place just a few years after the events of the first game. With the evil crime syndicate Zed in shambles, Joe decides to embark on a journey to master the ways of the shinobi. Unfortunately, while he was gone, the surviving pieces of Zed have come together to form an even greater threat known as Neo-Zed. Joe returns to not only find the Oboro village in ruins, but his master gravely injured from the fight. He's told that his fiancée Naoko has been taken prisoner by Neo-Zed, so it's time to once again put those ninja skills to good use and kick some terrorist ass. We do this through 7 stages that were designed to show off the power of the Genesis. You see, this was a first-generation 16-bit game from Sega, and pretty much everybody was impressed by the large character sprites, the variety of level designs, and this cool waterfall background. We eventually make our way to the docks, where Joe has to put up with both choppy water and these Rambo wannabes. This is the only way to get to Neo-Zed's secret mountain base, which is the kind of villain's lair that you'd expect to see in a James Bond movie. The path eventually leads to Naoko's prison, but first we need to battle the masked ninja. And if that wasn't enough pressure, the ceiling is slowly dropping inside of that prison, threatening to crush Joe's beloved sweetheart. And though you hate to see it, that's exactly what happens. Here's what you get when Naoko gets crushed to death. Hey, don't be sad. Let's go ahead and go back to the timeline where Joe's a little bit quicker at the kill and manages to save Naoko. Here's what happens next. Okay, now before we get back to Shadow Dancer, we first need to talk about Shinobi 3: Return of the Ninja Master. This is a proper sequel to the Revenge of Shinobi, seemingly continuing the story where it left off. With Neo-Zed defeated, Joe and Naoko finally got married and worked hard to train the next generation of Shinobi warriors, including a guy named Kato, who we'll learn more about in a bit. It was while recuperating in Japan that Joe started to sense that the evil forces were once again coming together to threaten the world. He was right to be concerned because Neo-Zed's remaining minions have been ordered to stop Shinobi at all costs. We learned that the masked ninja we defeated last time was merely a double for the true leader, who apparently has the power to unleash a grave calamity upon the world. But don't worry, Joe's not gonna let that happen, so he vows to do everything in his power to finally, once and for all, eradicate Neo-Zed from the face of the earth. Alright, so from the space shuttle to the weird boss characters, I think it's fair to say that Shinobi has always flirted with science fiction. When it comes to Shinobi 3, that flirting turned into a full-on love affair. This game is filled with technology run amok, including a full facility designed to create a clone army. At one point, we surf down the channel while shooting a flying airship, and don't forget about this freaky boss. Of course, beyond the science fiction elements, we get a lot of really effective levels that show off what the Genesis was capable of. I especially like this horse riding level and this bit here where the forest is on fire. At one point, we need to fight a pair of those masked ninjas from the previous game, only this time around we know they aren't our real enemy. All this leads to a flying ship, which is where the real leader of Neo Zed resides. His name is the Shadow Master, and he looks a little bit like Shredder and battles Joe in this weird, psychedelic holodeck stage. This is a tough fight, but we've come too far to let the monster succeed. And with a mighty swing, Joe is able to destroy both the Shadow Master and Neo Zed with a destructive blow. And after all that, this is what happens next. Now that Neo Zed has been defeated, it's finally time for Joe Musashi to catch some rest and relaxation. Perhaps that's why his former student Kato decides to take it on himself to rescue a bunch of elementary school children. But what Kato stumbles onto is more than just a simple kidnapping, and a fight with a brand new evil ninja organization known as Union Lizard left the young warrior dead. Heartbroken, Joe returns to New York City to confront Kato's mother and avenge the death of his former student. All that is left are the memories and his faithful dog, Yamato, who can't wait to tear those Union Lizard thugs to shreds. Now, if you're wondering where the evil organization got their name, it's because their leader has a gigantic reptilian form. The plan is to use the reptile's instincts to guide the Union Lizards to world domination, starting by taking over New York City. This is a chance for Joe to visit all of the tourist traps, like the Statue of Liberty and this cave. We finally make it to the Union Lizard's base, and sure enough, the head honcho is indeed big, massive even. He's at least twice as tall as our hero, and that's when he's sitting down. Thankfully, Joe was able to use his ninja magic to gain the upper hand, and this is what happens next. So, normally, this would be the point of the show where we stop talking about the Shinobi sequels. Now that both Neo-Zed and Union Lizard have been defeated, there's really only one place for the series to go. To the future! That's right, we're gonna end this episode with the Cyber Shinobi, which is also known as the Shinobi Part 2. This is widely considered to be the worst of the old school Shinobi games, and the Joe Musashi that we know and love is nowhere to be seen. But hey, seeing as we've come this far, we might as well just finish off the timeline. The Cyber Shinobi takes place in the distant future of the 21st century. Seeing as Shadow Dancer took place in the late 1990s and this stars Joe's grandson, that means that this Master System game takes place right around now. In a not at all confusing move, the youngest Musashi is also named Joe, and he's going up against a brand new terrorist organization that goes by the name Cyber Zed. That's right, it's the futuristic remnants of the Neo-Zed that the eldest Joe managed to defeat. This completely different Joe will need to battle his way through 6 stages in an effort to prevent Cyber Zed from launching its stolen stockpile of plutonium around the world. This game stretches the science fiction themes from Shinobi 3 about as far as they can go. We eventually discover that the crime syndicate is being controlled by something called Mother Brain, who lives in this big tube and uses an Ed 209 knockoff for protection. Look, there's no reason to prolong this. Let's just cut to the ending. So here's a question. Have you ever noticed how many games we've covered where the end boss is called Mother Brain? The one from Metroid is easily the most famous, but let's not forget about the ending of Armored Warriors. When 2 different games did it, I just chalked it up to it being a coincidence, but now that there are 3 examples, I think it's safe to call it a trend. Anyway, back to Shinobi. I'm not sure any of these endings are really all that great. In fact, I spared you from some of the really bad Shinobi endings, like this game over screen from the Sega Master System version. This one doesn't even come with a wall of text or a cool picture. The entire end is just a game over screen. Yeah, no thanks. I think part of the problem is that it's just hard to get invested with any of these stories. They end up repeating a lot of the same beats in the setup, especially when it comes to Zed reforming and one of the friends of Joe dying. The only genuinely interesting twist came with the first game, and everything after that was kind of a mess. You never get the sense that Sega had a story for Joe Musashi beyond dismantle the terrorist group once and for all, which he ultimately fails at. There's no energy or urgency to these conclusions, and half the time he's just standing around and watching something happen that's completely out of his control. I love Joe Musashi and enjoy most of these games, but I think it's fair to say that the Shinobi series needs a serious rewrite. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every Monday. In fact, we have a whole playlist with over 100 of these episodes, so go and check that out. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is a game or series that needs to be rewritten? You've already heard me talk about how the Ninja Gaiden trilogy needs to be tightened up and how someone needs to go through Phantasy Star 2, so I'm excited to see what you come up with. In other news, we're back for a new year of Defunct Games. That means you'll see reviews of Music Racer and Earth Knight later this week, followed by a look at what I hope to accomplish in 2020. I actually have a lot to talk about, so I hope you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.